Yep. Hello, my friends. My name is Radomir. I'm a chief leader of Rutenia charitable organization Rutenia. And here we have Mr. Roland Freudenstein. Mr. Roland.
Yes, hello. Hi, everyone.
Mr. Roland, who are you exactly?
Okay, so I am the vice president of GLOBSEC, which is a think tank. It's been around for 20 years. Its headquarters is in Bratislava, in Slovakia. I'm the head of the Brussels office, and we have also permanent offices in Washington and in Kiev since last December. What we do is we think, we write, we discuss, we organize conferences. We try to provide solutions for the complex challenges of this world. And we have a special focus on Ukraine. And if you want me to go into more detail, we can do that now or later during the questions, as you wish.
Understood. I see that many issues require not only a comprehensive or strategic analysis, but also specific operational tactical actions. The European system is very measured in these decisions. In ever simpler terms, it is slow and unhurried. As a Ukrainian, I am much faster in making decisions and wanting to do everything quickly. And often I encounter elementary misunderstanding and bureaucratic costs. I do understand everything, but I'm interested in how the Europeans react to this, perhaps excessively activity of ours. Does it annoy Europeans? Do you have similar analysis or something like that?
Well, certainly, if Ukrainians do things fast in their own country, nobody in Europe, and nobody in the European Union is annoyed. That's for sure. So the European Union is very slow in decision making for the sheer fact that it consists of 27 member states, right? And they all have their national interests. They all have their own political mentalities, their worldviews, their own styles of decision making and implementation and all this. So it is completely natural that it's slower. But if you compare individual member states of the European Union and Ukraine, you also have to see that, the European Union member states are at peace. And that's why some things take a little bit more time here. Ultimately, no one minds Ukrainians being fast, but please don't expect this from countries that are in a very different situation right now, and especially don't expect it from a European Union which is as big and heterogeneous as we are.
Okay, thank you. Also, let's get back to reality. One part of our reality is corruption, as you've said. I will not say that corruption is a Ukrainian disease. It is worldwide, including European. It has different types of and different volumes. In my opinion, the basis of corruption is, first of all, a person's desire to speed up the solution of his or her issues. In Ukraine, it was solved in the following way. If there is an obstacle, it can be solved with money to speed it up. And this, unfortunately, is part of our mentality. We are fighting this, but reality dictates its own conditions. Do you see any threat from our side that we will accelerate process in this way? We want to take the best from you, but not the bureaucracy and the length of decision making. Do you have any understanding of these processes?
Pan Radomir, I must say I have a slightly different definition or explanation for corruption. And this is unimportant whether it's Ukraine or Moldova or Georgia or even the countries of the European Union. As you said, yes, corruption happens in many places. But if I look at corruption in societies that used to, and I'm saying this only once and in this context, that used to belong to the Soviet Union, there are just some bad remnants and some bad traditions in the way public servants define their task. And I mean, we don't even have to go only back to the Soviet Union. We can go back to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. We can go back to many states and countries in the 19th and 20th century where, you know, a public servant was not sluha naroda. It was not a servant of the people. You know, actually, it was the other way around. A public servant was in a position of power, uh, and people had to come to them and be nice to them, and maybe be nice in a very material way in order to achieve something. You know, the question is not speed here. The question is what understanding of public institutions is there in a society, but especially among the people who represent these public institutions. And, you know, I'm far from saying that all Ukrainian public servants are corrupt or something, but I'm just saying that they are probably, according to very serious analyses and statistics, there are more corrupt public servants in Ukraine than there are in some other countries, especially in some member states of the European Union. Now, this is first of all, a big problem with the rule of law, with the independent institutions. This is a problem with checks and balances. This is a problem of public trust in public institutions. And as long as this is not there, you will have some corruption. So this boils down to an effective reform of the public service in which corrupt behavior is ruled out, is actually punished, actively punished. I mean, that's what needs to happen. And then there is a fundamental problem in corruption with equality. You know, I mean, corruption creates inequality. I mean, those people who have the money and the chutzpah to bribe an official have a huge advantage over those people who can't afford this or who play by the rules. That is not the way to organize a modern democratic society in the 21st century. So you know, I mean, this item of speed, like you want to speed things up, so you hand over a bit of cash to the official. That is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there is much more below the surface here that we need to openly discuss and openly address. So that would be my wish for the Ukrainian debate on how best to fight corruption. It's really some fundamental understanding of the institutions of a society with the rule of law. That's what is necessary.
I'm wholeheartedly agree with you on that subject. That was a sensitive question, and I am really thankful that you've answered it. Churchill once said that democracy is not perfect, but no one has come with a better one yet. Do you have an understanding and a task to make the recommendation on how to create a better system, especially since we see that tyranny is often quicker in making decisions, even if even the most atrocious ones, once the democracy calibrates and though out once?
Well, I mean, besides what I already said in terms of strengthening the rule of law and creating and strengthening independent institutions, I don't have any particular advice for Ukraine. I mean, Ukrainians have to build their own democracy. Is it going to be a presidential or a parliamentary one? Well, right now it is a combination of both systems. We have many member states of the European Union that are closer to one side or closer to the other. I mean, take France, that's more a presidential system. United States, by the way, is another presidential democracy. Germany is a very parliamentary democracy. Ukraine is a mixed system, and I think there's no problem with this. So this is really up to the Ukrainians. As long as there are checks and balances, and as long as the parliament controls the executive and there is an independent judiciary that controls both of the others, I think there is no particular recommendation I want to give to Ukraine.
I get it. And to change the topic, we as Ukrainians in the course of our history have always fought for our land and our people, but very often mistaken in the choice of the partners. Do you think that choosing a partner in the form of the Western world and the USA and the NATO was the right choice? Won't we face the fact that Europe will decide first of all its own interest?
Um, I would frame the whole question differently, if I may. I don't think that Ukraine should ask, do we want the West as a partner? I think Ukrainians have said in their overwhelming majority that they want to become a part of the West. And that's the way I personally, and I think most people in the West actually see it. It's not like Ukraine has the West as a partner or the West has Ukraine as a partner. No, this is like Ukraine is now part of the West. We have to make it happen in institutional and organizational terms with EU membership and NATO membership. But Ukraine is already part of the West. Ukraine is a Western country. Ukraine is a democracy. Ukraine is a democracy that is being attacked in an unprecedented way by an autocracy, a dictatorship. So, in that sense, there's no European interest vis-a-vis Ukraine. There are, of course, interests of individual member states of the European Union or of NATO vis-a-vis Ukraine. But collectively, the EU and NATO have already said that Ukraine will be a member. We have to work out exactly how and when, but yes, Ukraine is by all measures part of the West, and the rest is full of challenges. But the basic question has been answered. So I wouldn't frame it in this terminology of partner or not partner.
Okay, thank you. If we will be able to slightly change the vector of questions, let's talk about Russia. Russia is the main aggressor on my state on the present time. Tell me, do you have an understanding and strategic vision of what will happen to Russia after the war? I ask this based on the fact that before 24th of February of 2022, Ukraine was also off subject in analysis and analytics. Do you consider certain regions of Russia to be subject to future geopolitics?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a fantastic question. It's sufficient for another interview, but let me just say at this point that indeed, President Zelensky himself was rather skeptical about Putin's intention to full scale to totally invade Ukraine until it actually happened. But what first of all, what could happen in Russia? And I totally understand the reasons why many Ukrainians really hate Russia and hate the Russians. Because I mean, of course, this war is not just Putin's war. This is the war of Russia. And the Russians, for whatever individual reasons, are marching along, are afraid, are keeping their mouth shut. Only very few are actually tremendously courageous, by the way, and are protesting. But so I totally understand why Ukrainians would hate Russians. But I would also say that no country on earth is genetically or by some law of God unable to build a democratic state, right? There was a fledgling, incomplete, imperfect Russian democracy in the 1990s. The early Putin years, you had independent judiciary. You could openly criticize the president on Russian television and not get arrested. I mean, this is easily forgotten today. But it's not like Russia has never, ever been a democratic country. No, it's just that the last 20 years have been so increasingly depressing and increasingly dictatorial. so that we arrived at the point where we are. Now, full disclosure, I know that this sounds provocative to many Ukrainians and understand why, but I still have some Russian friends. These are not people in Russia. These are not people, well, except for one, there's Vladimir Karamurza, who's been sentenced to 25 years in prison. But I know many Russians in exile. Not only do they define themselves as full Democrats, but they also they wish for Ukraine's victory in this war. You know, this is something that I know that many Ukrainians and Central Europeans, by the way, don't believe this. They think that Navalny has some imperial mindset, that Russians, even Russian Democrats, have not said goodbye to empire. According to my best knowledge, that is wrong. This is not so. The Russians I talk to, be they in London, in Vilnius, in Berlin, or elsewhere, even in Brussels, they all know it's either democracy or empire for Russia's future. And they have opted for democracy. They all say, of course, Ukraine has to be restored in the borders of 1991. That means with Crimea. Crimea is Ukrainian, right? They all say that. And so for me, it is not unthinkable that Putin and Putinism, that means the mindset behind his thinking, is so discredited after a while that whoever follows Putin has very strong incentives to try something completely different. Again, I know many Ukrainians who say that, well, one dictator will follow another dictator. Putin will be followed by some crazy, or less, maybe less crazy, but another cruel general, people from the Siloviki, people from the oligarchs, whoever, and nothing will ever change in Russia. I don't believe this. If I'm proven wrong, yes, I might be wrong and hopelessly naive on this, but I just know too many Russians who think completely differently and who have understood that not only the person Putin, but the ideology, the great Russian imperialism that he stands for, is a pathology that Russia has to get rid of if it wants to survive as a nation. And then, of course, there are people who are saying that, well, we don't want Russia to survive as a nation. Russia should split apart into as many pieces as possible. I would say be careful what you wish for. The breakup of Russia would not be like the breakup of the Soviet Union. I mean, please remember that in all the components of the so-called Russian Federation, because of course it's not a federation, but the components of the so-called Russian Federation, there's a majority of ethnic Russians, right, in each one of them. So, you know, to just say for I don't know, for Buryatia, for example, to just say goodbye to Russia and create an own independent state, it's not so easy. It would create enormous internal conflict and tension, and possibly even civil war. So, you know, let me put it this way. Maybe I'm too German looking at this, but you know, in 1946, there were very few orchestras in Europe outside of Germany who would be willing to play Beethoven. Right? Simply because it was totally out of question to perform a German piece of music. And it took 10 years and arduous work for some kind of reconciliation between Germany and its neighbors, especially France, and then for European integration to take its course. And this was a tremendous amount of work. I'm I'm not saying that this is an example for the future of Russia and the future of Russian-Ukrainian relations. That will have to be figured out by Ukrainians, of course, most of all. But I'm just saying that as much as I understand Ukrainian ruling out of a democratic future for Russia, I think if Russia credibly says goodbye to the idea of empire, to the idea of this whole notion of near abroad or special zone of interests or whatever, then we should also take Russia seriously and try to help them in this. Now, that doesn't mean that the sanctions are going to be abolished immediately. You know, if you ask me about the current sanctions regime, I think what has to happen above all is that the existing sanctions need to be implemented effectively, and the circumvention has to be avoided. And this will entail some very painful, probably third-party sanctions. So in other words, the EU will have to start, and the United States will have to start sanction countries that circumvent the existing sanctions against Russia by delivering stuff, buying stuff from them, and so on. This is extremely difficult, but this is the task at hand. And but to sum it all up, I think there is a possible scenario which should not be ruled out, in which Russia itself radically changes course, because no one wants to die for Putin, and in which Russia can, in the long run, somehow become a partner to its neighbors.
Indeed, that's a noble philosophy that everyone needs to have their second chance, and I agree with you on that. So our channel has already a number of interviews that include a very important and global task for Ukraine, both now and in the future. Briefly, it can be formulated as follows. After victory, we will face an equally important and difficult task, post-war reconstruction. And this applies not only to the economy, infrastructure, but above all, the restoration of human soul, the psyche, the life of people as such. Europe has extensive experience and development in this area. Could you suggest or orientate which organizations, funds, institutions are able to assist us in this? After all, this is not only an internal Ukrainian issue, it is becoming a common European one.
Yeah, I think it's, to a large extent, on the strategic level, it's the European Union, which should help keep Ukraine on track, you know, before the end of the war and after the end of the war, which also should plan the reconstruction of Ukraine, and then organize it. But these are then individual member states of the European Union and NATO that will continue to have their bilateral relations with Ukraine. But above all, it will be civil society in the West, which has to help Ukrainian civil society to flourish. And you know, this works by financial assistance, but also encouragement, exchange, constant dialogue, and you know, exchanging best practice and so on. So in all these areas, Western civil society will have to step up to the task. So that's what I would say.
I too think that it should be done on the local level, and it will be more easy on the governments and the human people and the people and themselves.
Yeah, I think, for example, sorry to interrupt, I think we will have a myriad of city and municipality partnerships.
Indeed.
You know, I mean, this is already happening inside the EU. It has already several generations tradition among West European countries. And I think this is going to happen massively with Ukraine, so that every city in the European Union will have a partner town or partner city or partner municipality in Ukraine.
Indeed. Finishing the topic of Russia, I would like to ask you, do you participate or give any recommendation in imposing sanctions or on the beneficiaries of the Russian system?
Yeah, sorry, I already answered
Talked
this
about
in
it
the
previously,
previous
but
question. Yeah.
the question is more of what kind of sanctions would be sufficient to implicate on those people who beneficiate this system.
Yeah, and that includes Ukrainian oligarchs. I know, but frankly speaking, I really don't know enough about this. I mean, the West should be careful about this group of people, and this is Ukrainians or other nationalities, or people like Gerhard Schröder, the former Chancellor of Germany, who made fantastic money with Gazprom after stepping down, after leaving his post in the Chancellor's office. So all these people should be under strict observation, and there should be something like a clear code of ethics not to cooperate with them, of course. And if they have done punishable things, then they should be punished for that. And there should be parliamentary investigations also about all these people, not just Ukrainian oligarchs. So yeah, that we need to take this into account. But I wouldn't want to add any details to this response.
I got it. Thank you for participating in our interview. In conclusion, as an active and very informed representative of the European community, what would you wish to for the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian statehood, and perhaps our president in the current situation?
It's extremely hard for me as a person to give any tips or advice here. I mean, because I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration. And I know from many Ukrainian friends the hardship that your country is going through. So, it sounds cheap, but what else can I say than that, maybe something my grandfather used to say. I mean, before the new day dawns, the night is at its darkest. So don't lose hope. And Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine. Heroям Slava. So that concludes our interview, and we are really grateful for your participation and your aid that you've been providing throughout this year and the previous one for Ukraine. And I just wish to say that we as Ukrainian nations are really grateful to everyone who supports us in every way, and that includes you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you too.